repeat your question, and we'll go a few minutes. All right.
I know you're making a number of appearances with former Speaker Gingrich in connection with the speaker series over the next few days. I've heard the view expressed by someone on television the other day that Speaker Gingrich was behind pushing the no votes amongst the House Republicans on Monday as a predicate to some sort of 2012 presidential drive. And my question is, what are the politics of someone thinking that they will achieve a bounce at that level by killing this program?
Well, rarely in American politics comes a program or an initiative or a bill that is as unpopular as the bailout bill. Mail is running in almost every congressional office 20 to 30 to 1 against. Now, why is it so unpopular? It's partly unpopular because Hank Paulson wins and I give this out every year, starting actually this year, the President James Buchanan Award for Political Stupidity, in that he went to Congress, as you remember, a week and a half ago and said, look, I would like a blank check for $700 billion. I know that this is the most unpopular administration, and there's no credibility left in this administration, but I still would like that $700 billion. And by the way, I know that I used to be on Wall Street and headed up a big Wall Street firm, and nobody trusts me because they don't trust Wall Street anymore. But nevertheless, I still would like that $700 billion. And by the way, don't amend it and don't review it, and there's no Supreme Court, no judicial review at all. I just want this complete discretion, blank check, 3-page bill for $700 billion. Now, when you understand where most Americans are, as I've described it, and when you understand that most Americans view Wall Streeters, rightly or wrongly, as having created this crisis through their malfeasance, nonfeasance, greed, cupidity, and stupidity, and you also realize that most Americans view Wall Streeters as getting 6 or 7 or 8-digit salaries for years now, you can understand that when people understand, or at least they think, that this is a taxpayer-funded bailout of those guys, there's not necessarily a great popularity generated for this piece of legislation. Newt Gingrich and Congressman Boehner and many other Republicans, and perhaps also including John McCain, saw an opening here for angry populism. Now, never underestimate the effects and the power of angry populism, particularly when people are economically frustrated. It's always been below the surface of American history. But when people are particularly stressed economically, angry populism rears its head. And the Republicans would very much like, or at least thought they would like, to be the head of this angry mob saying no to Wall Street. In fact, there are a number of advertisements, commercials went on the air over the past week tying Barack Obama to Wall Street, even though it came out of this whole proposal came out of the Treasury Department. It didn't work, obviously, because when the Dow lost 700 points on Monday and another 300 points today, people, even in the House, even Republicans, are saying, no, obviously, I've got to do this. And they will do it. Newt Gingrich has been running for president for a long time. Yes.
I just want to thank you for your insistence on referring to it as a bailout as opposed to a rescue plan or anything else. And I guess as a question, I would just kind of want to ask of you that in your many speaking appearances and so on, and even after this gets passed and it seems to start fading away, that you insist on the language of the bailout, that you have the platform to do so, and I hope that you keep pressing the question of bailout, because I think it's important not to forget the implications of that.
Well, let me, your point is that I should continue to call it a bailout, and it is being called a bailout. But let me just explain to you very, very briefly, so we're all on the same page, why Wall Street and why many supporters think of this as a rescue rather than a bailout. The idea is that if the Treasury Department gets the authority, it will conduct a reverse auction. You know what reverse auction is like? An airline does when it's overbooked. Give you $100, you know, $200. How many people can we get to get off this plane because we need it? Well, it will conduct a reverse auction with regard to the bad debts, the mortgage-backed securities that a lot of the houses, the big investment, and the big banks now hold. And that reverse auction will give a market value to securities for which there is not now a market value. And the Treasury will then buy them, but hold them until housing values start rising again, at which point some people believe the Treasury might even make money. Don't laugh. No, it could, it's possibly. I think it's about a 10% probability. I think it's small, but it might happen. And then the other view, and this is one of the problems last week, is because the Treasury Department, that is Hank Paulson and Ben Bernanke at the Fed, they had different ideas about what this was. Paulson saw it as a reverse auction, finding the value of these securities, but Bernanke kept on calling it a recapitalization of Wall Street. That is an infusion of fresh money into Wall Street, over and above what these particular securities might be actually worth. And when you actually talk and use the language of recapitalization, then a lot of people who know something about the market and a lot of people on the Hill say, now wait a minute, shouldn't we get shares of stock? Shouldn't the taxpayers get some warrants to purchase shares of stock in the event that these things go up in value? Aren't we just doing the same thing that Warren Buffett did with regard to Goldman Sachs? And there's been a huge amount of confusion on the Hill about what is actually going on. Yes.
Two parts to the question. The first is somebody's been saying just changing the accounting rules of this mark-to-market business would increase capitalization without costing the taxpayer. My question is, how does just changing an accounting rule do that? The second question...
Well, let me just deal with the first question, because I can't remember one question to another. First question is, some people are saying, in fact, Newt Gingrich has been saying this, just to take a name out of them, that if you just get rid of the rule that says these big banks have got to carry these securities on their books at market value, the market value, which is now, let's say, 20 cents on the dollar, and let them carry it at a face value that may be 50 or 60 or 70 cents on the dollar, then they will have enough capital. What's creating this crisis, says Newt Gingrich and some of these people, is that forcing them to mark these things down to unrealistically low levels simply because capital markets are now frozen is creating itself the crisis. Now, the problem with that logic is that you have certain companies like Merrill Lynch that actually did take huge losses, cleaned up their balance sheets, and by doing so gained enormous credibility on the street. And then, because they had that much credibility, were bought up by, in that case, Bank of America. In other words, it's not even possible for these companies to actually acknowledge that these pieces of paper may, at some point in the future, be worth more than they're worth now, but right now, nobody trusts what they're worth, and it is really about 20 cents on the dollar, and to write it down, to take the losses. Why not do that? The problem with getting rid of the regulation is nobody knows what these things are worth if they're not worth what, in a sense, you could get in a reverse auction, or what you'd have to write down to regain the credibility, which is what Merrill Lynch did.
Okay, and another part relates to a piece by the Dean of the Columbia Business School today in the Wall Street Journal, I don't know if you've seen it yet, suggesting instead of giving the money to Wall Street, basically bail out the people whose houses are in trouble. That we'll get the government will get the mortgages, and then when the houses go up, and we're helping the people stay in their houses rather than bailing out Wall Street, and we accomplish the same thing.
Yeah, let me just repeat that. Apparently the Dean of the Columbia Business School suggested today in the Wall Street Journal that instead of bailing out Wall Street or rescuing Wall Street to the tune of $700 billion, let's use the $700 billion and help people stay in their homes, and that will make these securities, the mortgage-backed securities, worth more.